Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to yet another Mortal Kombat video. Now, coming off the Shang Tsung ending video I made a few days ago, I wanted to go into detail on discussing what I had mentioned about the Titans there. If you didn't watch that video, then you may want to go ahead and give that a watch just before this one, but if not, in short, in that video, I discussed the somewhat pros of including Titans into the universe, and how they are kind of beneficial to the series. However, in saying that, the Mortal Kombat franchise has tragically been unbelievably hit or miss with these ideas and concepts. Elder Gods, for example, are very interesting on paper as overseers, but have rarely actually played a large part in mortal affairs. So with that being said, you would think it would be special for whenever they did appear, but unfortunately it's typically underwhelming. Another character that really does suffer from this is the fabled One Being, a character heavily foreshadowed during the events of Mortal Kombat Deception, being set up as the true next big antagonist, but would then be shelved by Blaze for Armageddon. Since then, the One Being has kind of been lost to history, and tragically his legend has just become a myth and has been forgotten by the series. Titans, more specifically Kronika, was a character that was really hyped early on in the game's promotional days, and she was set up to be a formidable force. Being the arbiter of the hourglass of time, she was seen as a grand deity unlike anything we've seen, but in games she was really underwhelming, coming across as more as a generic villain than something that could shatter reality, as she basically needed a MacGuffin to do so. She would further be undermined in Aftermath, but that was of course due to the inclusion of Cary Tagawa's Shang Tsung. He was placed front and center, so it's kind of understandable, but I do have to play devil's advocate here and say that the scars still do show. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I would fix this and actually build off what we have in 11. Whilst, yes, I could talk about what I would do in 11's story to change and alter the narrative, what's done is ultimately done. There's no changing it now, and I don't like retcons, so let's work off the building blocks and foundation of what we have and actually build a narrative surrounding the mythos of the greater beings of the universe. Now, as of making this video, we currently know nothing about the situation of Mortal Kombat 12 or what way the story will go. Whilst I highly suspect it will sway in the favor of Liu Kang's ending, where Kung Lao is now the main protagonist, the Elder Gods, One Being, and Titans don't actually have to be a part of the main story. If this so is the case, the best place to actually tell this story is in the Krypt. Whilst the Krypt has been designed in the last few games to kind of be a themed puzzle game, with 11 being the most ambitious with its somewhat open world exploration, a big aspect of that mode was the ability to find tools, armor, weapons, and gear for your character. The Krypt has always been a fantastic addition to the game and a great way to unlock content, but in saying that, the Krypt's weakest point was telling a story, and this showed with 11. There was so much mystery surrounding Shang Tsung's island and what exactly was going on. Something happened here. Fan favorite fighters were stranded here in this desolate, torn world between fabrics of reality and what felt like madness. There's something here, but it was never really tapped into. So with this said, how does this tie into my idea with the greater beings of the universe? Well, give me a second, as I am going to tie it into some other ideas. Now, a really common thing that has become quite popular in the last decade or so is world building and storytelling through the form of items and weapons. It's a very simple and fast way to build your world without taking away time from the greater narrative. Of course, it was games like Dark Souls and Destiny that have made this style of storytelling very popular in the last few years, and I think it would greatly benefit MK in a massive way, especially if there are tools that help you advance in the Krypt. Now, my general gist and idea to tell this story is by scattering murals across the Krypt, and by collecting these murals and by matching them together, again emphasis on the whole puzzle aspect, it can play some form of dialogue or cutscene explaining the relationship of the greater beings in the universe. But how would this story go? How would I weave the thread and tie in the likes of the One Being, Titans, and Elder Gods? Well, to do that, I actually have to expand the universe a little bit more. For this, I will be combining a lot of aspects from the old and new canon, so they can thread and weave through each other without causing a disruption in the main canon. I want to respect the old as well as the new canon, so that there is a way that the story and games can weave into each other without disrupting the main canon. Now, with that said, the oldest record on hand we do have of the Mortal Kombat universe is the somewhat dawn of time itself, where the One Being clashed against the Elder Gods. To expand on the universe, I actually will be going a bit further back, so the events that unfold here will make a little bit more sense in the grander scheme of things. Again, I don't want to tamper with the source material, I simply want to expand on what's there. So with this said, this is how I would write all of these beings together. Before the Age of Gods, the darkest corners of reality brought forth the Titans, beings of divine power on a cosmic scale. Unlike your typical gods or elder gods, the Titans represented the forces of the inevitable: death, life, time. They are the dawn of the universe itself, and because of this, they saw each other as threats, monsters if you would. And what do monsters do best? They draw blood, so the series was always born in war. Because of this, Titans would wage battles against each other, and they could last for what felt like an eternity. It was a fate and destiny that many believed that they would succumb to, that is, except two Titans, Kronika and Kronikos. Now, for those of you who don't know, very early on in development, Kronika was intended to be a male character. This was changed later down the line, but again, I'm trying to reincorporate some ideas that I'm aware of with 11's story. Now, I am aware that this might be coming out of nowhere, especially for me to introduce what seems to be a new character, but bear with me, it will make sense in time. The two would try to escape their fellow Titans by hiding in the deepest corner of space. Knowing that they would be hunted by their brethren, Kronika had to find a way to protect them. By forging an hourglass, she was able to create time itself, something that didn't really exist in the void, so now she could manipulate it. By harnessing the power of time itself, she was able to cut off her end of the universe from her fellow Titans, effectively creating a barrier that would shield and hide the two. I know it sounds a little bit silly, but we're dealing with cosmic space deities. Now, Kronika's plan was indeed successful, but this was something that she had to continuously monitor. So tragically, because of this, Kronika was forced to somewhat sever her relationship with Kronikos and abandon him, as she believed that the right thing to do was to protect him. Now, while she couldn't be there for Kronikos, from the fabric of space and time itself, Kronika would forge what would be known as the Elder Gods in order to keep Kronikos company. They would be a literal living memory of her care and affection. However, Kronikos did not see this in the same way. Kronikos felt like he had been betrayed, as he was imprisoned and guarded by what felt like wardens. In a fit of rage, Kronikos began to attack and gorge on the likes of the Elder Gods, being dubbed by them as the One Being. As I mentioned at the very start, this seemed like a fate that all Titans would eventually succumb to: violence, murder, and madness. When Kronika saw what he had become, she would forge what would be known as the Kamidogus and leave them in the hands of the Elder Gods. Whilst it would not kill the now One Being, it would split his body into fragments, with Kronika maybe one day hoping that he could regain his sanity. And with time on her side, this was most certainly something she could wait to see. From here, Kronika draws her attention back to the hourglass and sees that by abandoning her post, her protective ward has splintered, and through these cracks she can see the fate of the Titans. Deformed by the abyss, they have become monsters and shadows of their former selves. Having sensed these Titans drawing closer to her position, Kronika is forced to mend the cracks of time itself, whilst the Elder Gods protect and monitor the realms. So, if you can't quite tell, this is basically how I'm writing out Kronika for the entirety of the original timeline. timeline. This allows the main series of games to go forward, with glimmers and hints of a greater being, but not fully elaborating on it up until now. So with that said, how do I reintroduce Kronika into the narrative? Well, after fixing the protective wall, a huge tear and crack ripples throughout it, splintering it in ways she had never seen. But how is this possible, especially when she is the Titan of Time? Well, it's due to Raiden. Having tampered with powers clearly above him and resetting the timeline, he has broken reality itself, and by doing so, it forces the Titan's hand to stop his actions. His constant alterations to the flow of time has caused her a great amount of stress and pain, and thus she's forced to get involved. This is of course something that we do finally see during the events of Mortal Kombat 11, and well, we know how that story goes as she's ultimately defeated. But is it a true victory? With the Titans now dead and the new wielder of the Hourglass having no idea what he's invited to the universe, our heroes are now left with an uncertain and very scary future. So, why did I do this? What does this actually do for the overall greater narrative of Mortal Kombat? Well, I wanted to create this mural and story to add layers to the complexity of the Mortal Kombat universe. You see, all of these characters suffer from one big issue, and that is that they are very one-dimensional. The one being is actually more of a concept than an actual character at this point, and I feel like it's kind of criminal how long he's actually existed since the original canon and hasn't been given anything to work with. Whilst, yes, I am bestowing him with the title of Titan, it doesn't really take away from who or what he is. It expands on his very bare bones lore and allows everything with him to unfold in the same manner, with different layers being added to what feels like a character. It shows how the biggest thing in the universe became the realms. So this kind of adds layers to the one being's character and a complex relationship with not just Kronika, but the Titans as a whole. We know they are out there. It's all a matter of what we expect to see from them in the future. And whilst we are on the topic of Titans, let's actually talk about Kronika. Kronika here for me is a character that I really wanted to kind of redeem. For me, in Mortal Kombat 11, she felt like a really simplistic character. Honestly, it feels like all of her actions in 11 felt like it was done more so out of spite than that for the greater good. In this version of the story, I wanted it to seem like there was more going on with her character. Whilst yes, she can be pissed that Raiden turned Shinnok into a vegetable, we need to add more layers to her character than just spite. It actually turns Raiden into the main villain of the story due to what he has done. By adding this to her character, it makes her far more complex and makes it seem like she wasn't doing it out of anger, but instead out of fear. Fear of what the unknown could bring to a doorstep. The more broken the timeline gets, the easier the time wall is to break down. It makes it so that by her resetting the timeline, she can recast her illusion and barrier that can protect everything. And again, this adds to what I had mentioned about the madness of the Titans. With her wanting to reset time, the Elder Gods may believe that she's suffering the same fate that Kronikos did and want to stop her with the Kamidogus itself. Of course, something that they wouldn't be successful in doing. Now, at the end of the day, we know how her story ends, but I wanted to add layers to her actions, and most importantly, do some world building. The sudden inclusion of Titans was very blindsiding. How could something so big be avoided for this long? So I hope if an idea like this was to be introduced, it would be able to elaborate on a lot of the ideas and issues of the old and current canon. I'm not a fan of throwing away established lore. We do remember older games. It's not like when we move on to the next one, we forget everything. So I hope this does change in the future. And the thing is that by writing a story like this, you've basically set yourself up to make a villain outside of the realms itself. You can introduce new characters from the darkest reaches of space without any of the creative limits at hand. It quite literally lifts a barrier that allows anything to happen. And as I mentioned at the very start, you don't actually have to forcibly insert this backstory into the main story of the game. The Krypt is a fantastic game mode that has never actually had a story mode. But until then, guys, this has been it for me and how I would fix the one one being Titans and the Elder Gods. This was actually very fun for me to put together. It allowed me to think outside the box and kind of display the stepping stones we actually do have here for a greater universe in the Mortal Kombat series. There's so much here and it's been glimmering since Deception, so I do sincerely hope something comes from this. Like I said, I know that many people aren't too hot on Titans, but they do exist, and if they do so, let's actually do something creative and good with them for the benefit of the series as a whole. Mortal Kombat has a rich legacy that goes on beyond 20 years, and I feel like this is actually a good way of tying things together and forging something that no one would expect. Now, with that being said, what are your thoughts on this? Would you actually like to see something like this happen, or would you much prefer the one being Titans and Elder Gods to just fade away at this point? Do you prefer the much more basic down-to-earth characters, or do you like the idea of cosmic deities? Please do comment down below, as I'm genuinely very interested to hear about this. I think it's important to hear everyone's opinion on it going forward, because we don't know what's going on with the next game. There's so many ideas on the table, and I'm looking forward to exploring it in the future. But until then guys, that has been it for me. Before this video does wrap up, if possible, please do give this video a thumbs up. I'm currently being shafted pretty hard by the YouTube algorithm, so I'd really appreciate if you showed your support here by simply liking the video and even commenting if you'd like. Also, please do not forget to subscribe and tick that bell, as it will keep you up to date with all of the content that I do have coming out going forward. But until then guys, that has been it for me. So as always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I will see you all next time.